Hey there, Board Game Maniacs, and thank you for joining me for another exciting episode of Painting with a Maniac. We're not at the painting part yet, but if you've been following along in the first episode of this build for the trees for the Moon of Endor, we pretty much sculpted this out of water clay, and I showed you all how to do it to get it to this point. Now, if you haven't checked that video yet, I strongly suggest to check that out before watching this one. Because in this video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to mold this tree to prepare it so that when we're going to make some duplicate copies of the trees, it's going to be a lot faster and a lot more time efficient. Cost effective wise, a little bit of money is going to, like for the initial building of the mold, you need like water clay, latex, ultracal or hydrocal, and Vaseline and a couple of various other things. But in the long run, it does save you if you're planning on making more than one tree. It definitely saves you on time because, as everyone knows, time is the most important thing. And the best thing about this is after you make the mold, you can make as many of these copies as you want, and you could have a whole table full of these trees if you wanted to. So let's get on with the molding process. For to start the molding process off, I want to talk about a couple of things first off. And number one, where this is water clay, it is delicate, and you got to be careful when you're doing this that you don't damage it. But even if you do, it's not anything that can't be fixed in a matter of minutes. It's very simple, unless you actually drop it on the floor and completely destroy it. Then you have to sculpt it from the start again. But we're not going to do that, I hope. But in either case, there's a couple of ways for molding. We could do this and it'd be one mold and you just pull it out, but I don't want to do it that way. I'm going to show you how to create a two-part mold. It is a cylinder, in essence, the tree trunk. So we don't really have to worry about, three-part molds or what have you. Some people watch this probably saying, well, just do a one-part mold. It'll be so much more simple. And it would be simple, but the thing is when you fill up because I'm planning on making these out of latex and then filling them with foam. And when you do that, if you have one part, it's going to be a little more difficult to pull the tree out of the mold, as opposed to if it's a two-part, you open up the mold and you just pull it out. Super simple. So I want to make this as simplistic as possible. Is it going to cost any more money to do it this way? No, not one bit. It's just a different process for doing the molding. So before we do the molding, this top of the water bottle, the 2-liter bottle, we have to cover this over. And the reason why is because if we keep it like it is, where it has all these little ridges and indents, what will happen is you may create a mechanical lock onto two halves of the mold, and it can be very problematic, as I explained into the last video. So we are going to cover this over with water clay first, the same stuff, just cover this over to make it just one part so that it will protect it, so don't get mechanically locked. Another thing I want to talk about before we even start that is when I do my molds of my masks or props or what have you, and it's a two-part mold, I make a clay wall that goes up the perimeter and all around so that separates the two molds. And I usually make the wall, like I said, it's a clay wall by using water clay and doing it. But we're going to try a different process today. And again, it's all about trying to be as time efficient as possible, as well as maybe a little bit of cost effectiveness too as well. But you can certainly do a clay mold wall, which is very simple, and separate it in half, but we're not doing that today. We're going to be using these things as a separator. What these things are actually just CD cases. So what I did is I just took the CD cases apart from the two halves and I cut it so it's like this. So what we're going to do after we get the clay off for the top of the water bottle, just wait till I zoom out a little bit there so I can show you what I'm talking about. Zoom, 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 zoom. Okay, here we go. So where this is the water bottle part, we're going to put clay over this just to cover it over so it'll make it easier. And then we're going to take these and we're going to push them in to go like this. So this is going to be our separator, these CD cases. They got a little bit of rigidity to them. They're not too floppy or flimsy, so they're going to be able to hold some of the weight. And that's all we need. And you'll see as we go along, it's very simple. Just stay tuned as we start covering over the clay for that part. Take a water clay, and it's the same process that we did when we blocked out the mold for this, or blocked out the sculpture. We're kind of doing the same thing, because pretty much what we're doing is we're just going to alleviate getting like any mechanical locks because of undercuts or what have you. And it's pretty simple. I'm just taking the clay, rolling it up into snakes, clay snakes. I'm just putting it around just so that we can cover this up to be safe. Because all of the hard work that we did in creating this, we don't want it to get ruined and have to, start from scratch again because we forgot to properly block it out. Because we don't want that at all. So we just want to make sure that we got this all covered so we don't see the plastic. We may leave a little gap, and that will be for flashing or bleeding, which not like actual bleeding, but with the latex will have an extra channel to flow through, which we'll explain if we do so. But for right now, just be aware that this is what we're doing, is we're just covering up this part of the water bottle so it's easier for molding. And this water clay that I'm using is very, very inexpensive. Like, you can get 50 pounds for like 20 bucks Canadian. And that's pretty cheap. I think it's like 50 pounds for 20 bucks. It's something like that. It's not too expensive. Again, this is just water clay. You don't have to sculpt in water clay. You don't have to do this in water clay. You can do it in whatever you want, to be honest, but it's totally up to you. It's your discretion of what kind of material you use. But I choose water clay because it's very fast, very cost effective to work with. So I'll finish covering over this and I'll be back and I'll show you what I did. From where I have, you can see that I just got a bulb on top. It's bulbous more or less. Now, when I'm doing the clay walls, I'm probably not going to use these for the top part. It may actually be clay to go around this one half to this section here. We'll see. But in either case, now I got a Sharpie and we're going to put a dotted line to where the mold wall is going to be. And you want to do it so it's as even as possible and as straight as possible. You'll see as I go along. So I'm going to start roughly around here. And I'm going to put a dotted line here, going up and over, and then on that side. And that should make it work. So if you just watch, I know you can't really see where I'm doing this dotted part, but you'll see. And this is just a reference to when I'm putting my mold wall up. I know where I'm going to be sandwiching it, or sticking in the clay. Not sandwiching, I just had a sandwich for lunch. That's why I'm like, sandwich, what? Yeah. So again, this is just like a rough idea. Then if we continue it along on this side, continue like this. So there's the mold wall. Pretty easy. Dotted lines. I don't know if you can see the dotted lines going down, but that's where I'm separating it from one half to the other. And now we're gonna start going on with the mold lines, or the molding separated by using the CD case, and we'll go from there. So just bear with me for a moment. So there's the CD case. Now you could put Vaseline onto it if you want, so when you slide it in, it'll be easier to take out without pulling the clay off. So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to rub a little bit of Vaseline onto the CD edge, and then we're going to put it in. So I'll be back in a second. I'm just going to grab my Vaseline. So I'm just using a little bit of Vaseline on a brush. Do it that way or this way, and do it this way. This is just for later on for ease of removing it. So all I'm doing is I'm pushing it into the clay much as I can without damaging the clay. You gotta be very gentle. And you can see there, right? Okay, good. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we're gonna go on the other side. I'm gonna put one in there too as well. So again, a little bit more Vaseline, like so. Again, the Vaseline is not a necessary step, but I think it's important, an important step. So roughly about there would be good. I'm just pushing it in. Making sure it's nice and stable. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the camera, and when I come back, I'll have them all up to this edge. And then after that edge is there, we're going to make the mold line for the clay part, and then we'll start with the molding. So now I got the mold well done completely. So again, you can see the CD cases and the edging of it. You can see I put water clay here and water clay here where it's touching this water clay. And as I mentioned before, you don't need to use the CD cases. Usually when I'm doing my molding is I just make a water clay wall instead of using these all the way around. But I figured, try something different today, why not? And there's a couple other things that you're probably noticing, such as this thing here and that thing here. What is that? Is they're called key marks. And the reason why, and up here too, the key marks, the purpose of the key marks is very simple. And that is when you make the two halves together, if some molds are kind of like strangely shaped or they're too smooth around and there's no way of distinguishing how the halves fit together and everything, by creating keyholes, this will end up being a negative in the stone, a positive, and a negative. So that when you sandwich the two halves together, it will lock together and it will not shift back or forth. And that will ensure a really nice tight fit onto the mold. So now what we're going to do now is we're going to mix up some ultracal, or hydrocal I should say, and we're going to start molding this. Now one thing that I did do is I applied a little bit more Vaseline around, as you can see, and that's it. We're ready to start our molding. So let's go and do the molding. Now we're going to mix up some hydrocal. So again, there's different stone that you can use. My stone of choice for this is hydrocal. It's a very dense stone. I use it for a lot of my molds. And you can see I have a big bowl here, and it's not freezing water, but it's not warm water. The warmer the water is, the quicker it sets, and I want to have a little bit of working time with it. Now this first layer I'm doing is probably, it's called the detail coat, and it's the most important layer of all. Now what you're going to do is you're going to need to grab a chip brush for the first layer, and I'm going to go grab that, and then we're going to mix this up. So it's just a chip brush that you can get. It's very cheap. You can get them in the box for like 10 bucks. And now the way we do this is very important, this process here. So you take the hydrocal. You can see Brady's doing the camera work right now because I'm going to get pretty dirty. This is hydrocal, and I got it in a scoop, so I put it over here. And you don't just want to dump it in, you want to sift it in slowly, just like this. And you want to keep sifting it until it looks like almost like a dry, cracked riverbed. So I'm just going to keep going here. And like I said, this Painting with the Maniac episode is a little more advanced, but the hardest part is going to be finding the material to make this if you are going to wanting to make it. There is alternatives obviously as well, but because I want to make duplicates, I'm doing it this way. So just still sifting it in. And the benefit of me doing it this way again is that I can mass produce or make more than one copy of the tree. If you're only making one copy, then you wouldn't need to go through all that sculpting and everything else. You could just use like the milli pot or the air dry clay and just do that. So that's probably, you know, it's pretty good. Just give it a little tap here, let it sit for a minute. Just leave it sit. And you can see it's starting to look like a dry, cracked riverbed, and this is what we need. Now, A word of safety is because this here is loose stone, and if you're going to be working with this and shuffling around and doing a lot of even small amounts, so it's good to wear like a dust mask or something, but because I'm talking, I don't want to wear the dust mask because you're going to be woo, 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 you're not going to be able to hear it. But if you're careful and you don't throw it around, you're not going to get so much into the air, so just be aware of that. And you can also wear gloves if you want, like some just non-latex gloves is what it has to be, because things can happen to it. You can see all the cracks are going on, so it's ready to mix. So I'm just using my hand. Again, you can wear gloves, it's up to you. I've been doing this for years upon years upon years upon years, so yeah. And with hydrocal, I just don't bother wearing the gloves. And you can see the consistency of it. And the reason why I'm mixing it up, you could use a squirrel mixer too as well, but I'm mixing it up and I'm squeezing it because I don't want any lumps. You don't want to go thick with this because, again, it is your detail layer and you want to be as smooth as possible, as creamy as possible, not too watery though. So you can see kind of like the mixture there. Did you get a good shot of that, Brady?
Yep.
You can see there. So I'm just going to mix this up and then we're going to go and we're going to start applying it to our sculpture. All right, so I got it mixed up. It's nice and lump free, I should say. So we're going to start applying it with the chip brush. Now, Brady asked, how much is the cost for this stuff? This you can get a 100-pound bag and it's very, very inexpensive. Probably between $30 and $40 for it, and that's it. So you can, again, it's pretty cost effective. As you can see, I'm just brushing it on. Some people, when they're doing molding, they'll use air, like a compressor to have the air here to blow out any of the air bubbles as it goes on. Me, if I see an air bubble, I'll just blow it out. And again, because we are making a 2-part mold, this is only the first part of it, or the front half. And again, it is the detail coat. It is very important, so you want to pay close attention to this part. And one thing, because I'm working with water clay and water clay is so soft, after you saturate with water so many times, it is going to become super soft. So before you start doing the molding part, you should probably leave the water clay sit for a little bit just to harden up. You can see here. Can you get that on camera there, Brady? All right. Right over the CD part too, because we need that for the mold wall. And I'm not applying like a lot of pressure to it. I want to keep it as intact as possible with a watertight seal onto it. Because if I start shifting it around too much, you're going to have some problems. So I'm painting over the keys there with it. Going on to the top half. Now this is temperature sensitive, which means that if you are working in a really warm environment, this stuff is going to start setting up a lot faster. If you're working in a cool environment, then it's going to take a little bit longer to set up. So just be aware of that, but it's not going to set up in like 1 minute. Like the fastest I've seen this set up was probably within about 8 to 12 minutes. It was starting to set up to the point that I was like, okay, I can't move it around anymore because it would pull the detail off. So with this part, the trunk, once I go over it once, I'm not going over it again and again, because until the stone dries, because you will pull the detail off of this. And there goes all the sculpting that you took your time to do. So you just want to make sure that you don't go over it more than once in the sculpting part. But oh no, I got so much more left over. What do I do with it? Well, it's pretty simple. I just put it on this part with the edges, and I just leave it drizzle down. Because we are ultimately going to have this at least a good 1/2 inch thick, or close to a 1/2 inch thick when we're done the mold. And it's going to take different layers for it. And after you put on the first coat, then you know you can mix up the ultracal to be thicker, or hydrocal to be thicker. It's just the first one got to be kind of within this watery state, because it'll grab all the details by going into all of the sculpture that you did. Think of it as like the wash part. The wash is thinner than what the paint is, and by doing that, it just will fill up that part. So again, this is kind of like the edging it on, making it thick as here. We could put a clay retainer wall there if we wanted, but it's not a necessary thing. And this is called vertical molding, if anybody is wondering. So once I finish this off and it's set, we'll be back with the next layer. You can see here, the first layer is done. It is warm to the touch, and it's hard. You can hear me knocking on it. Now, you don't want this to sit too long. You want it to be hard, but you still want it to be warm, because once it starts into the cooling phase, then what happens is the other layer of stone that's put on this will not stick to it. It needs to be hot to be able to bond. And you can see I created a little bit of a bridge or ridge here. So now we're going to go and we're going to mix up the next layer of hydrocal. This next layer is going to be more, it's going to be more, it's going to be thicker, and also with a little bit of warmer water, so it will set up a lot faster. All right, so we're going to start doing it, and again, it's the same process. The reason why I'm showing the same process is to show you just that how much thicker we are mixing this up. And I add a little bit more extra water too as well. You don't want to have too much water, because you know you're going to end up wasting a lot. I never wasted any of it onto the first layer because I used every bit of it, which is great. Less waste means less money wasted in material. Just like this. If anybody's wondering where I buy my hydrocal stuff and water clay, here in Ontario, Canada, there's a place in Toronto on Munster Avenue. It's called Sculptor Supply Canada, and that's where I get my supplies. You can order them online, but if you order a 100-pound bag online, if it's not free shipping, you know you're going to be paying through the nose for it. Right, Brady?
Probably.
So remember, dry cracked riverbed, but a little bit extra than what it usually is. So it's going to be a little bit thicker. You can see it's a bit there. Leave that sit for a minute, and then we'll apply it again. Just so you can look, it is not considerably thicker than the first coat, but a little bit thicker, because it's more stone than water that I added. And this is so that it's just going to speed up the process, but you don't want to make it so thick that you can't put your hands through it, because then that's just a waste. So now again, we just start slobbering it on just like before. And as you're going on with this, it's going to end up starting to get thick as you're applying it. And that's what it's supposed to do. And when it's thicker, it's easier to apply it more vertically. Just be aware that, you know, you can make this a super thick mold if you want, or you can make it a little thinner. Now, if you are wanting to make it a little thinner, what you can do is you can take some burlap. I'm not going to do it, but you can. And after probably the second layer where it is, you know, you can't see any clay showing through, you know, it's thick enough, then you would take some burlap, scrunch it up, put it into the mixture, wring it out, and then apply it to your mold. And what that happens is it's going to interweave with the hydrocal or ultracal, whatever stone you're using. And by doing so, what it does is that it will give it more rigidity and more strength. So just be aware that you can do that. So I'll be back after this layer is all applied and dry, and we go on to the third layer. Or actually, maybe what I'll do then is, after all the layers is done for this, I'll tell you how many layers it is, but the process is exactly the same, no different. So then we'll be back after this drying. We're going to start doing the second part, or the other half. The mold is all nice and hard. It's still pretty warm to the touch, but we can go on from here. It's nice and thick. Again, you want to at least get, well, me personally, I get between 1/4 and 1/2 inch thick. You can be not as thick if you're using like burlap mixed in with the stone, like I said, or also too as well as you can use fiberglass, but I'm not using I didn't use fiberglass because I don't have the proper ventilation for when I'm making a mold for fiberglass, because you have to make sure that you are, even though you're wearing a respirator, that is well ventilated. So since that is done, and I put big tree front because I was like labeling my molds, just turn it around, and what I did off camera is I just took paper towel and I covered over the sculpture part, just so I don't get any dirt or anything onto it, because we are going to remove this and the clay wall from it, the CD, very gently by just pulling it apart, and then we may have to just sand up the edges, and that's why the paper towel is there, when we sand up the edges so it don't fall and hit the sculpture and we spend more time cleaning it off. So I'm just going to remove these gently, just like this. You can see, just doing a little bit of a wiggle here and pulling out, nice and smooth. And you can see my key is locked in place there. Same thing, you don't want to wiggle too much though, and the reason why, because they are pushed into the clay and you don't want to do any damage to your sculpture itself. So I'm just going over this side just so you can see it on camera, and just gently pulling them off, just like this. The CDs work out beautifully for this. And then we pull the other one off too as well. Again, just as gentle as possible, because you don't want to damage the mold, or the sculpture I should say. You want to try to keep that up in best form as ever. And then we just do this. This part is super easy to do. And you just grab this gently, not prying too hard. And because if you try to rip it off too hard, you can pull off in pieces, and that way it's going to take a little bit more time to try and clean it out. So again, just taking the clay off of the mold. Bam. Just like that. Pretty simple. So now I'm just going to take a rasp, and what the rasp that I'm talking about is the ones that you use when you are sanding down drywall, if you ever do drywall. I'll show you what a rasp is in a second. I have to go grab it, and then we'll continue on. A rasp is this thing right here. It's got a metal screen or mesh onto it, so when you scrub it, it's going to, clean up the edges nice and clean and all nice and smooth. You don't want to scrub too much. You can see a difference. So this is a big difference between the CD case, where it's nice and flat and smooth, and the bumpy ridginess of the clay. So just be aware of that. So again, what we're going to do is just take this and just scrub, because we're kind of just cleaning up the edges before we go any further along. So I'm going to scrub this up off camera, and when I'm all cleaned up, I'll show you what's next. There, it's all taken off, and I cleaned it all off with the rasp so that there's no hooks or overhangs or what have you. So it'll be easier to take the mold apart. Now, the next step that we're going to do is we're going to make some pry marks, it's called, by just using some water clay, and we're going to place them around, and we're going to mark them with the marker on the other side. And then after that's done, any exposed stone, we want to put Vaseline onto it. And the reason why, because if we didn't do this and we put the other layer of stone over top of it, it's just gonna end up sticking, and you'll never get them apart, because stone sticks to stone, and that's what's going to be the problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make some pry marks out of the water clay, put them around the spots, and I'll come back and we'll Vaseline this half before we start putting the other stone onto it. So I got the pry marks onto it. So again, I just squared off some clay and I put them around in spots. And then what I did is I took my magic marker and I carried a line across. Let me know, because when this is closed off, you're not going to be able to see where these pry marks are, because they're going to be covered with dust from the stone. So I'll know where I can put my screwdrivers in to pop them open. So again, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It don't really matter how many you got, but you just want enough so that you can be able to pry it with a little bit of ease when you are going to be opening it, because you don't want it to be jammed closed. Also, you can see these are the key marks that we put into it that are going to be locked in place, and there's a nub there too as well, and the nub over there. So that's just going to help it so it's going to lock back together. So the next step we're going to do is just going to take some Vaseline, and we are going to go over all exposed stone on this side and carrying it over just a little bit, like on this part here. I always spin it around. So carrying it a bit over here, and the reason why is because sometimes the stone can kind of move over and you didn't kind of see that, so you would create more of a mechanical lock, like I said, so you don't want to do that. So I'm just taking some regular old Vaseline from the dollar store and applying it all like this, make sure I get it all up onto the right to the edge, because you need to make sure you got it covered completely. And I mean completely, because you don't want to have any problems with trying to take this, the mold apart, because that would be just bad for business. So yeah, you can see me just applying it, and the mold is still hot, or fairly warm I should say, so that the Vaseline's kind of melting a bit. You can leave it cool all the way down if you want. It's up to you, but we're just going to continue on like this, just adding the Vaseline. And again, you're doing this everywhere there's exposed stone. Just be gentle when you're going around the edges so you don't move or ruin the sculpture that you did already for it. Just like that. And I'm not going to record putting stone on this part because it's exactly the same process that we did for the front half. First with your detail coat, and then a little thicker, then a little thicker, letting them dry in between, but not getting to the cold stage, because, you know, it's going to have problems with it. So just make sure you do all of this, Vaseline it all before you start putting the stone onto it. And that's pretty much it. So what I'll do is I'll keep doing this. I'll put the stone onto it, and when it comes time to open it, I'll be back, which will only take a second. But in actuality, you're looking at maybe about 30 to 35 minutes. You can see the stone is all set. It was getting late, so I figured I'd set the stone and then I'd leave it overnight because I was getting tired. And it is all 100% done. Now, one thing I did off camera is this morning after it was set is I took my Rasp again and I just cleaned up around the entire edge of this. And also, if you look, I continued the lines from where the Pry Marks are, because what this is, it's kind of like a twofold of what that is. Number one is it shows me where the Pry Marks are for when I'm sticking in the screwdrivers open up. But number two as well is that it serves as registration marks. So if them keys ever would break that are inside, because sometimes keys will just snap off, that's just inevitable. But I'd still be able to line up the marks to line it up. And it just makes things a little bit more easier. But in either case, our next step, whoops, I just dropped my screwdriver. Our next step is to use our screwdrivers, and we are going to pry this apart. Now, a word of caution, when you are rasping it, there's a lot of dust. So again, you want to wear a dust mask as much as possible, just to be safe, and protection on your eyes too as well. And then from there, it's just time for prying. So I'm just gonna stick a screwdriver in there. It's gonna be a little bit of resistance because it is gonna be stuck to the bottom of the board, but we did put a little bit of Vaseline on the bottom of the board, so it should be okay. And you just go in, and you don't want to force this. You kind of just want to gently wiggle around like this. Same with tear too as well. Kind of do it here. Just gentle. And again, we're just going to pry it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop this because I don't want the dust flying around onto the camera when I am going to and prying up on all of this stuff. So when I got it open, I'll be back and I'll show you what it looks like, because I have to turn the camera off, move the camera to another room so I don't get any more dust into the camera, because I don't want my camera to be destroyed. So again, just remember, screwdrivers and both Pry Marks, kind of is even if you can, and just gently pry it until this pops open. And that's it. Now, one other thing before I go is if you're having difficulty with some of my molds, like this mold's pretty straightforward, but if you're ever doing molds and you have some problems with it, you can take some popsicle sticks, I was going to say toothpicks, too small, and you stick it into the pry hole and you start hitting it with the hammer, and you go just around it until it starts separating, and you start putting your popsicle sticks in until it just comes free. So that's another way if you get any stubborn molds. So, but for the most part, this should just pop open pretty easy. But I don't want my camera to get full of dust, so I'm going to stop it here. You can see it's pried open. It was open pretty easy. There was no getting stuck, because again, you had to, if you paid attention and did do any mechanical lock, like again, that it's kind of like the two lips sticking together, and then you wouldn't be able to open it because it is mechanically locked together. Like it'll stop, like one edge and one edge it would do. That's what mechanical locks are. But because we avoided that, we don't have it. So now the only other step here is we're going to clean it out. But before we clean it out, I'm not going to run the camera for this next step. I'm just taking my rasp, and again, I'm going along all the edges on both ones just to make sure it is flush with the mold wall. After that is done, I'm going to remove the pop bottle, and I'm going to try how to clean out this water clay. And just be aware that with this water clay, some people, what they like to do is before they start molding, they'll take like latex house paint and they'll put it onto the clay so that when they mold, it's easier to remove from the mold. Like the clay will be easier to mold, or they treat it in some form or another. Me, I don't usually treat it, and it comes out pretty good because I usually wait till the clay is not as soft, so that when I do the molding, it's not going to stick into it. But there is going to be cleaning of the mold regardless, so I'll show you about that too as well. But right now I'm just going to stop the video so I can rasp all around these edges just to make it up nice and clean and pretty looking. Just to reiterate on a couple of things here, when I said to rasp around the edges with the rasp, you don't want to do the inside, because this got to stay exactly like it is. It's the outside part. So this part here, this is where, you know, you can get some sharp edges and you end up cutting yourself. And the same with on the bottom. Just make sure you rasp. Don't ever rasp on the inside, because that's going to cause too much damage to your mold, and it won't have spaces, gaps and everything when you sandwich it together for more steps that are coming up. So having said that, I'm a little out of breath here from doing all that rasping, but now it's time to clear it out. And word of caution, whenever you're dealing with stone molds, pretty much any molds I would say, you never want to use metal tools. If you have to, you have to, but you want to try to avoid it as much as possible, because you can scrape the sculpture that you did and it can ruin it. So therefore I always use popsicle sticks like this. Where did I get this in focus? And I cut them at an angle, and that's what I use. But before I do that, I just, you know, I try as best as I can to remove the clay by hand and the pop bottle and everything. Now this here part is only the tip. There's no sculpture on that, and because of the type of mold it is, I am going to use a metal tool. Like again, you want to try to avoid doing that as much as possible, but you know, if you have to, then just be very gentle so you don't scrape inside. But I didn't sculpt anything here. This was just to hide the lid. If I scraped in it, it wasn't going to make a big difference. But you can see there, I just did it gently, and there goes the pop bottle, the 2-liter pop bottle. It is out. So let's set that aside. And now we're going to clean this clay out. Now, because it's water clay, I wouldn't start scraping it yet. I would pretty much just try to peel out as much as I can before you have to go in and scrape, because it will save a lot of work. So again, just very gentle, like this here. Being careful, excuse me, to grab as much as you can out. Just like that. So just keep pulling this out, and then the stuff that's left stuck in, because this is water clay, it is water activated. So we're just going to take it to the sink after we clean out as much as we can, and then we're going to scrub it out and scrape it with the wooden popsicle stick. So once I get this out and we go to the sink, I'll be back and I'll show you what else, or what it looks like inside. Nice little bit of tidbit of information. The water clay that you pull out, you know, if there's no dust or, you know, chunks of stone on it, You can reuse this. All I do is usually have a bucket with some water into it, and I'll throw this into the bucket. As long as you have a lid that you can close it, then, you know, when you're gonna do more sculpting, you just use this, and it'll be very soft. You just, easier to manipulate and sculpt with. So just a little tidbit of information, you don't have to throw this water clay out. You can keep it and just put it into a bucket with water and a lid. You can see there, I got some of the clay removed. Again, there's still residue of clay, but we're gonna use water and clean this up. But you can see all the nice texture that's in here now for the tree. So again, this here is a more cost-effective way of making duplicates. Now, you can make them by using fiberglass instead of stone, which will be a lot lighter and durable too as well. And then you can make them with plastic resin if you use a silicone for to make the mold, and then fiberglass over top of it. But again, I'm doing this to show you a more cost-effective way if you want to go this route to make duplicate trees such as this. So let's jump over to the sink where we're going to scrub it out and be as clean as possible with this mold, and make sure that the clay is, we can take as much clay out as we can. I have it in the sink and I got the water running. Again, these laundry sinks work great when you're cleaning out the molds and everything. If you don't have it, you can always take it outside and scrub and with the hose. But you can see I have a scrubby here that I'm using. This was picked up from the dollar store. I'm going to be using. And I'm also going to be using my toothbrush, not the one I use to brush my teeth, but I bought a toothbrush from the dollar store. And also too as well, we're going to be using more of the popsicle sticks cut into the angle just to get into the little grooves. So let's go in tighter and you can see me cleaning it. And again, the temperature of this water is like a warm water. You can use cold water if you want. I just find that warm water loosens up the clay a lot quicker. And if you're doing it in a sink, you want to make sure that you invest in, again, I got this from the dollar store, these things here, which are graded screen drain plugs. And the reason why I want to do that, because this stuff, if this gets into your plumbing, it's going to clog it up like there's no tomorrow. And it'll be pretty bad. So let's go in for a tighter shot of this and start scrubbing away. So for scrubbing, again, just using the brush. And away we go with the scrubbing. You can see it's already coming clean. Now, one thing, no matter how clean you get your mold from the water-based clay, what's going to happen with this is that when you pour your first latex casting into this, when you pull it out, your latex is going to have some clay onto it, because no matter how clean you got this, you're not going to pick it all out. But after the first one, you should be okay, because then the clay is not going to be sticking to the latex anymore, because there'll be no clay, because the latex will end up pulling out the small little bits of clay that you mixed. So again, just doing it this way, just scrubbing it. You can see how clean it is that it's getting with the water running onto it. And then for any bigger spots, and I use my, or little more smaller intricate spots, I use my toothbrush. And then for even smaller on top of that, I use the popsicle stick to scrape it in. Not rocket science, pretty simple. So when this is all done and it's clean, I'll be back and I'll show you what the both halves nice and pretty and clean look like. And there you have, the molds are cleaned out as best as you can get it, as I can get it, and I scrubbed really good. So again, just remember that when we're doing the latex, which is the next step, and it's going to be in this same video, this video may be going on just a little long, I don't exactly know, but it's very important to get to the next step before we say tune into the next episode to see like the painting of the latex trees and everything else. So you can see it's all cleaned up. I'll go in a little bit tighter shot to show all the nice little detail that we got for these molds, and then I'm gonna piece them together and we're gonna pour latex into it and drain it and then just leave it sit, and that will be the end of this video. But let's go in and look at all the nice little layers of detail that these molds have. You can see all the nice negative and positive grooves onto them. Really like the way this turned out. Turned out really good. No air bubbles, no imperfections or anything. So the next step we're going to do now is I'm just going to pull out some latex. I'm going to show you how we half the two molds together, put the front half and the back half together, tighten it up so that it's not going to open up, and then we're going to pour some latex into it and then dump it out to drain it, and then that'll be it. But now just hold on to your hats, we'll be right back. on to doing casting it now with latex. That's what this process is called, is casting latex. Now, the materials we're using, again, we see the mold. I got the cheap chip brushes, as you can see. I'm gonna use this now. This chip brush is gonna be garbage after I use it this time because I'm using latex onto it and it'll have to be thrown out. And just a bucket, 5-gallon bucket is what I'm using. The bucket I get is so that I can put the mold into it and it can hold the mold so when I pour the latex into it. And this is the latex. Now, because where I make masks for film industry and the haunt industry and so on, that I buy this latex a lot and buy the 5-gallon bucket. You don't need that much, but again, I have this in my shop already because of all the building that I do. So just be aware of that. But if anybody's wondering what type of latex this is, it's RD407 mask latex by Monster Makers. Do you need RD407? No. You can use pretty much any type of latex. You can use a thinner latex. You can also buy like a thicker backing latex. It's totally up to you. The website, you can go to monstermakers.com and you can order it online here, or again, you can get different latex. You can even buy Monster Makers now with Sculptor Supply Canada, sculptorsupplies.com or .ca. So just be aware of that. Now, I'm going to show you, when we come back, I'm going to show you a nice little trick that will save you a lot of headaches. A trick to save you a lot of headaches. There's a couple of things first I want to talk about. You may hear that my voice is a little muffled because I'm wearing a mask. Latex has one main ingredient in latex is ammonia, and it gives off a very, very distinctive scent that can make your eyes burn and what have you. And people have become allergic or has sensitivity to latex. So make sure you're not allergic to latex before you do this part. Just be very cautious. Always, you can wear gloves when you're dealing with this latex, but if you're going to wear it, you want to try to wear gloves that are not powdered so it don't interfere with any of the latex stuff. Also, make sure you wear a proper mask. I hope this is coming out clear enough and it's not too, because I moved the mic up a little bit more, so hopefully it's not going to be too much. And because dealing with like heavy molds like these aren't like super heavy, but they are made of stone. It's good to wear proper footwear. I am wearing my sandals, so I'm kind of breaking my own cardinal rule there, but in either case, just be aware you want to make sure you're safe. Safety glasses, a proper respirator mask, gloves. I'm not wearing gloves. Again, I'm breaking one of my other cardinal rules, but anyhow, you want to make sure that you are safe before you even handle this. So what you want to do is you're going to open this up and it's going to be a smell. You want to make sure you're in a proper ventilated area when you're doing this. So as I said in the last clip, is that something that will save you headaches, and it actually will save you money too as well. Now, when I first started doing this and with the hats, I'd put them together and my sculpting wasn't that great, or my molding wasn't that great. I'd put them together and I'd pour the latex into it, and what would happen is when the latex would start leaking out the sides, and because of that, it just would ruin the mold. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to grab another chip brush. This one here is a little wide, and if not, this will be good enough. But anyhow, we are going to take some latex. Actually, I'll put the latex on first before we cut the video. So you're just dipping into it, and the latex you're doing is you're doing a fine little edge or strip around the edging of the mold, just like this. And you can see that, I hope. So you need to lift that up a bit so you can see. So again, just right here, just like this. And the reason why you want to do this is when this latex dries, it's going to be like a little gasket kind of that's in between the two molds. And this gasket, what it's going to do is it's going to give it more of a protective seal, which means that if any latex is going to leak out, this is going to stop it, because the purpose of this gasket is to stop it. But on the other hand, what this does create is a little bit of flashing or flange onto your mold that you just have to cut off, I should say. No big deal, but this just helps so much more so that if your mold making skills aren't that great, this will ensure you from you not losing any of your latex and dumping out on the floor or what have you. So just be aware of that. That's a little trick. So now, and that brush was good enough. Now we're going to seal it up, put a tie strap onto it, leave it sit for about 5-10 minutes, and then we're going to dump in the latex. The latex is covered up so I can take my mask off just for now, but this is a tie strap or a mold strap. You can buy one specifically for mold making. It does say universal molding strap or banding strap, but you could use like tie down straps. You can even use, I've just used rope or like really big stretchy elastics, but again, depending on the size of the mold. So just be aware of that. You don't have to use this. You can use whatever you want. And the purpose is just to squeeze it together and hold it nice and tight. So what we're going to do is we're just going to lay this strapping down underneath the mold, roughly like halfway, just to hold it in place. And we're going to take our other half, and remember we put them keys on there, so we're going to sandwich this together. Not difficult at all, just like that, and it's locking in place. So you can't really see that because it's too dark, but if there was any kind of seal break in there, what it'll do is light will pass through this and you'll see light illuminating on the inside of it. What I do too as well, I did this off camera, I do this for everyone on mold, it's a good practice to get into, is put your mold together before you put the latex around the edging for a gasket. If you're going to do that, or even if you're not, put your mold together and you want to take a flashlight and shine it from the outside around the edging and see if light is spilling in. If light's spilling in, then you got a gap somewhere, and that means that the latex, when you dump it, is going to start flowing out. So that's why you want to put the gasket on there. So we have that. Now we're just going to tighten down our strap, just so you're aware of that. So, you know, the little tricks that you learn over the years for doing your molding. And as I said before, and I'm going to say it again and again, that this tutorial for doing this tree is an advanced tutorial. This is not like you can do this if you're a beginner, but you know, get some help. That's all I suggest. So again, I just locked it in place. You got this excess, but this is nice and tight. So I'm just going to roll up the rest of this. So I'm going to roll this up just to kind of keep this from dangling everywhere and getting caught on stuff and opening up the mold. So when this is done, I'm going to sit it in the bucket and we'll be back. You can see there, I fit it in the bucket. I know it would fit in the bucket because I wasn't making the mold the diameter of it too big to not fit in the bucket. But if you don't have a bucket, or if you made your mold and it's too big, it's not a big deal. All you do is you just secure it in any way you can, stand it up against something and put tie straps onto it just to hold it in place. Now, what we're going to do, we're just going to leave this sit for like a good 10 minutes, just so that the latex will start setting around it. So in case, if there's going to be any leak, that gasket of latex will stop it. And after that's done, we'll come back and we'll start pouring it. And I'll show you the proper way of pouring, because you can't just dump it in like nothing, because you can get a lot of air bubbles and that can cause a lot of havoc to your mold, or your casting, I should say. All right, the time is up and we're going to pour it now. You're probably going to notice that my voice is muffled again. It's because I'm wearing my mask. So again, it is stabilized. You know, you want to make sure it's as stable as possible so you don't have any dropping or spilling or anything. Now, some people, what they do is they'll put a little bit of water into the mold first, and it'll break the surface tension for when you're pouring the latex in. You can do that. I usually don't do that. With my method, all I do is I just dump it slowly. And when I do that, I just fill it halfway up. Probably hear some plops. So just halfway up. And then what I'm going to do is I just take it and I give it a good little shake for a minute or two. And the reason why I'm doing a shake is just to also break the surface tension, as well as any air bubbles will come up to the top of it. just like so. And this isn't going to have really that much trapped air bubbles, because of the simple fact is that this, there's no undercuts or nothing rolling underneath it. But like if I had a mask per se, I'd have to fill up if it had horns or just the ears and the nose, just to fill it in to get in all them crevices. But this one is pretty straightforward. So again, just a couple more shakes. Just like that. It's pretty good. Now I'm going to fill up more. Close to the top. And again, give it some shakes there. Without hitting the camera would probably be better, but sorry about that. And what I like to do then is I'll take the same brush, the chip brush, and I'll dip it into it and I'll just brush it up onto it and kind of poke into it. Just like this. And again, every mold is going to be a little different approach of how you're going to fill the latex up. The reason why it's going to be different because of different sizes, different types of sculpting, everything else. This tree, the roots come all the way up to the top, so because of that, that's why I'm having to do this. So again, yep, just brushing it in. Now, a little bit of information about latex. The longer you leave latex sit, the thicker it's going to get. So just be aware of that. Like for my mask, I don't leave it dwell in here too long when I'm making masks, but long enough so that it's going to have a good thickness to it and rigidity, so it's going to be flexible but strong. And we're going to treat this the same way. So we're going to leave this sit for roughly about 10 minutes, and then we're going to brush it up one more time, and then we're going to dump it out into the bucket of latex, leave it flipped up the other side with support to drip out and dry. We'll be back after that, after 10 minutes, I should say. 10 minutes are up now, and I'm just going to brush it in again. This 407 latex is super thick. It's great for doing masks. What else can I say here? Not too much really. I'm brushing this up again because we're getting ready to dump it out now. So that's about it. So again, these chip brushes are garbage. They're going to be thrown out too as well. And so let's change the camera angle so we can dump this back into the 5-gallon bucket of latex and let it drip. All right, we're ready to dump here. So you can see I have some pieces of wood just sitting closely on the edge of this latex, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it out of this bucket right here, and I'm going to dump it in here. I'm going to leave it sit upside down and let it drain for a good 5-10 minutes. And then we're going to transfer it over to this empty bucket so we can close this latex up and just leave it sit and drip and dry. Now the drying process is going to take, latex again is another material that is environment dependent, which means if it's a colder environment, it's going to take longer to set. If it's warmer, it's going to set up quicker. Usually in the summertime, what I do is I'll take this outside when it's done dripping, and I'll leave it outside into the summer heat, and it'll dry within like about 20-25 minutes, depending on the size of the mold, obviously, and how thick it is. But we're going to flip this over, we're going to dump it, and then when we flip it back, that's going to be probably the end of this part of the video. So anyhow, let's pick this up. It's not that heavy. Again, sometimes the bucket will want to go with you. Here we go. And again, switch it around just a little bit. And away we go with the dumping. And sit it down onto here. I just leave that sit and drip the excess off for a good 5-10 minutes. Then we come back. All we're going to do is we're going to transfer this over to this empty bucket, and then we'll be back after that. And there we go. It is transferred over. It's still nice and tight because of the tie straps and everything. And we're just going to leave this sit. And again, because it is winter time here and it's in the house, it is warm, you know, to a fair degree. We're not freezing or anything, but you want to leave this sit really good, like a good 24 hours. I would suggest just let this sit so nothing is going to happen to it. And I close up my latex bucket because I don't want the smell of latex going around. There's nothing else dripping, but I just put it into the bucket, on the boards on a bucket, and I sit it onto it just for safety's sake. So if anything does end up running down, it's not going on the floor. But this concrete flooring, just when it's dry, just have to wipe it off. But that brings me to a next point about liquid latex. Liquid latex, when it gets on clothing or carpet or any kind of fabric or material, chances are you're not going to get it out. So when you're dealing with this stuff, you want to make sure you wear old clothes because it will get ruined. I had so much clothes ruined because of liquid latex, but I was aware that that's what happened to it. And as you can see, I kind of got some onto me here too as well. And that's the nature of the beast, I should say. So we're going to leave this sit for a good 24 hours. And this will be the end of this part of the video, which is going to be, first we did the first video that's going to be out is the sculpting part. Second part is the molding and casting. Now, the third video is going to be removing it, trimming it, and painting it. That's right, so that's going to be probably the final video for this big tree. And the sole purpose, like I said before, of making it this way, it is a longer process, but the benefits of this is you have this mold and you can make countless duplicate copies, so many copies of this tree. You can fill your whole house with them if you want to spend the time and make that many copies of it. But tune in next time, the next video, to see what's the next process is, where we are going. When this is dry, we're going to fill it with foam, and then we are going to demold it, as in open up the mold and take it out, trim it, and then paint it, and it will be ready for the game board. Or we can make a nice little fancy base for the bottom of it. Who knows what the next video is going to bring. You just have to tune in and check it out. So until next time, Board Game Maniacs, I hope you enjoyed this. And this process that we're doing just before we go is the exact same process you do if you wanted to make like a latex mask for Halloween. It's very, very similar to the point that it's almost exact, but obviously you're making a mask. You're sculpting on a different form instead of a pop bottle, even though you can sculpt in a pop bottle if you want. But in either case, I'm starting to ramble on again at the end of this video, but exact same method for making a latex mask. So until next time, Board Game Maniacs, if you haven't already, click on the subscribe and the bell notification, get notified for videos such as this when it comes out so that you can view it. And also, if you want to become an official sponsor of Board Game Maniacs, jump over to patreon.com, look up Board Game Maniacs and become an official sponsor. Every little bit helps. The subscribing, the liking, the commenting, everything helps Board Game Maniacs grow even more. And if you've seen the first year of Board Game Maniacs as opposed to the second season of this is way more. And we're just going to keep building more and more of Board Game Maniacs. And it's all because of you out there, the viewers. Thank you very much for doing that. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for supporting and everything else. Because without you, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing today. So until next time, be a maniac. Boo! Hope you enjoyed that video. If you want to keep up to date with Board Game Maniacs, click on the like and subscribe button to be notified when more videos come available. If you want to become an official sponsor of Board Game Maniacs, go to patreon.com/BoardGameManiacs. Or you can go to streamlabs.com/BoardGameManiacs1. That's right, and you can donate to help keep the lights on, keep food in our bellies, and play more games. We'll purchase more games, more equipment to make Board Game Maniacs evolve and get bigger and larger. Because of you, the viewers, I thank you from the bottom of my toes to the top of my head for all of your support. And until next time, Board Game Maniacs, be a maniac.